Hey, I'm going to talk briefly about the intercomprehension application, advantages, disadvantages, and kind of its what I think could be its future within Texas, for one, and more specifically, my hometown where I grew up, and also San Antonio, one of the bigger cities in which I lived in Texas. Both of these places are very different in their approach, educational wise, to learning additional languages. For instance, we'll start with Mejia, which is a small town in the middle of Texas, 2 hours away from any major city, but it has a very large immigration population from Mexico. Now, from my experience in this school, from kindergarten, which is P5, all the way up to graduating age, which is 18, we were not allowed to speak Spanish within the class unless it was a Spanish classroom. We only had one foreign language offered into our school, which was Spanish. And surprisingly enough, it was a very basic class. Even the people who had immigrant parents were struggling to learn anything in this classroom at the time. We covered, I guess, the basics of present tense, past tense, and future tense, but there was no development into what language is and how we can learn additional languages, which, as the intercomprehension method, when it's applied to a language classroom, is designed to encourage and to enforce or reinforce learning multiple languages. Now, what I see can be very advantageous to this context of not preventing Spanish to be spoken in the classroom, limiting conversations only to English, and not having a strong foreign language program within the high school, is that it would completely change, it will completely flip the script of this setting. Now, when I left high school, I moved to San Antonio. A lot of the people I graduated with still reside in Mejia or reside somewhere in a small town near there, and they have no major concept of the outside world. They don't. For me to come all the way to Spain is really unheard of from my town, because we don't have a view of the global world. We don't have a view of anything that's outside of what we know in this small community. And I'll venture to say that most small communities within Texas have this conundrum. But what can happen, an advantage of implementing a intercomprehension course within the school system, it will allow the students to broaden their horizons. Claudia and I, we just read the short little synopsis yesterday, and it's put on the Campus Virtual. You can look at it. Is that it was an example of a school in San Francisco, students coming from English background and a Spanish speaking background. They did an activity that involved an intercomprehension lesson and had a global view, a global position in the world. And for me, it's phenomenal. That's what we need as the world is growing and it's easier to travel. It's 7 hours difference from here to Texas, but I can get on a plane and in 12 hours I can be there, no problem. But was not always the case. And as technology advances, and we keep evolving as a culture and society, the transportation is getting better, so it can become cheaper. People are able to move around. People are being displaced by other means of natural disasters. And if there's a if there was a xenophobic feeling in the United States, like I feel like there is, then this could be a cure for it. This could be something that helps us overcome this fear of the unknown, overcome this fear of not knowing. And this is what we can apply to a small town, to a small town education system. Now let's take a look at San Antonio, a larger city, where we still have a large number of immigrants coming from Mexico. There's also people coming from different parts of the world as well, so we have different backgrounds within this community, but a large amount of them come from a Spanish-speaking country, and they share this culture with us. I'm part of this culture, and the school systems were completely different. It was encouraged to speak Spanish in the classrooms. Half the day was taught in English, the other half of the day was taught in Spanish. Here, from my experiences in Catalonia, teaching at St. Ignacy, we do science, hands-on arts and crafts, and like a chit-chat, like a English-speaking practice. And we do this all in English, so it's in the ICLIS setting, it's the CLI setting, and it's encouraged to speak English. Now, the same method is applied to these schools in San Antonio, but instead of English, they have Spanish. And we're teaching mathematics in English instead of Catalan like it is here. So there's some similarities to it, and I didn't spend much time in the education program in San Antonio, just a year teaching. So I have some experience, but it's not as profound as somebody who is teaching for 5, 6, 10, 20 years in the San Antonio school system. But what I have seen is that the children in the schools are more prompted, more apted to speak multiple languages. They will recognize, oh, Kevin speaks Spanish. We can speak to Kevin in Spanish. But Marga, or Martha, rather, better English name, Martha, she doesn't speak Spanish. So we have to speak to her in English. And they are able to recognize this code switching. But when they get to the high school realm, from primary to high school, there's still very few options for them to choose from for learning an additional language outside of Spanish. So what they already learned in primary would just be reinforced in a Spanish classroom setting in the secondary level. And for me, this is very limiting to the development of the student. So if we were able to incorporate this into the classroom within this environment, I would assume that we would see this improvement of having a global mindset even within them, even within the students who are coming from different backgrounds and different environments, based upon the article I mentioned earlier. Now, I think it's quite fascinating how this stuff works. I don't understand it, to be quite honest. I understand it, but I don't understand it as somebody who would be a doctorate in this study, in this field. But I understand that we can find commonalities and we can find different connections between the languages. And I'm about to close here, so don't worry, you go back to what you were doing in just a moment. But I think the most difficult thing, if we're applying this method right now into the curriculum, is the teachers that are in place. The teachers that come from an education system with a limited background in the foreign language experience and their motivation for wanting to learn additional languages, or their motivation for wanting to teach something that is completely outside of what they know. But if in the formation of a teacher, if in the training of a teacher, we can apply this method, like, hey, learn this little bit, and then take that little bit into your classroom. Take that little bit and then apply it to your English language class. For example, just in general, your English grammar class. Oh, guys, we have this word of station, but then there's also staciones, estación, y estación, for example. And not only are we showing that one vocabulary word for one language, but we're showing multiple ones at the same time. And little by little, we can make large advances. And it's not to say that we're going to have a complete change within 1 year, 5 years, but at least if we're making a movement in that direction, things will follow. Things will get better. Just some thoughts.